Good morning. This is Chris Doty and Ken Flannery from Gentian Financial, and it's our weekly Wednesday report. So as this becomes more routine for us, we're probably going to begin with sections that work well, the things that have also been feedback from you, and a few housekeeping items to start. Normally Peter at our seminars does all the housekeeping items, and he really keeps us in line, but he is sitting behind the camera as always, so instead I will actually bring up some of the housekeeping items we have. First of all, we want to welcome Angie. For us, Angela Zilka has been a phenomenal addition. You've seen her just announced in the newsletter as well. We want to welcome her, so if you can, please all say welcome to her right now to the new team. She's a wonderful addition, 15 years in the business, had a bunch of great references from people that we knew about her, so she's been a wonderful addition. You'll hear from her on the phone. She's been reaching out in a couple forms, and she's really made a very, very quick addition. It's interesting, so one of my consultants that we use after talking to her said, that is a fabulous human. That is somebody you need to bring on. So just as an FYI, I don't know if I was supposed to share that or not, but I did. So she's great. Please welcome Angie to our team. She's great. You'll see her and she'll reach out. She'll be working on different teams, probably myself, Ken's, also on Zach's. So you'll see her in many different formats. That's good with her as well. What I want to know as well is that let you know is all the past webcasts are available for your viewing on our website as well. So if you can't go to sleep, if you're, having some insomnia, take a look at those, especially the one on Wednesday last week that was an hour and a half, 2 weeks ago. It is killer. It's a great one. There's some great slides from it, so I'm just messing with you a little bit. Also, take some time to review and create. This is, I think, a good point for Ken and the housekeeping items.
Yeah, take some time to review your will, your trust, your power of attorney. Mm-hmm. I've heard a few of you talk about, hey, what happens if I get the virus?
Right.
What happens if it happens to me? Are my affairs in order? And if they're not, maybe this is a good time, since we have a little more time, to sit down, think about your wishes, your wants, and your needs on all that, and review your documents.
Absolutely. Another thing I want to bring up for many of you is there'll be that you've heard some calls from us about the regulation best interest. A lot of you have signed on online. That kind of time frame is done, so you'll get some of these. You'll get these 100-page books. Feel free to use them as kindling in your fireplace once you've read through them copiously. But that's the regulatory environment we were talking a little bit about last time. And another piece I want to bring up to you as well. Tomorrow we're going to have a women's program, and that's going to be a program that is going to be run by the females here on our team. And I know a lot of the women who are in our client group are actually doing a lot of teaching, some babysitting, some watching, some working. But if you have a chance, you're going to see an email come from Ashley and from the team here about a Zoom hangout tomorrow. And they've got some neat different ideas on ways to connect. So it's just for the females, but I want to make sure you guys know that that's available. And please look for that. If you haven't seen the invitation, there hasn't been a lot of invitations going out yet. It'll be today. The program, I believe, is tomorrow. And it's just a wonderful time for you guys to get together and have some maybe networking, doing a Zoom call together, and just have our team really give you some of its insight as well and connection. So I just want to make sure you guys know that that's coming out as well. Now, to introduce this next part as well, a lot of what's been going on has been a mindset and mindset altering. I know a lot of people are getting really, really impatient with the whole stay-at-home order. But out of this so far, there's been a few silver linings out of this COVID, and we had a great piece that I'd like to have Ken take. He found, and let's have him take a look at what some of the silver linings are.
Yeah, we found a great piece, and there's about 10 of them on here, so I'll go through a few of them here. Improved air quality over LA, Hong Kong. The smog has lifted. Why is that? People are driving less. People are using their vehicles less and less. There's less traffic accidents on the road as well. Mm-hmm. Climate change. We're starting to see the animals come back a little more and thrive. Reduction in crime. Why is that? Everyone's at home right now.
Right.
Increased hygiene. Everyone smells a little better today.
But wait, but everybody has a COVID beard, I've noticed as well.
We all need a haircut and a shave, I think, pretty soon.
I do.
Benefits of telework, getting used to working remotely, getting used to video conferencing. Isn't it weird if you've done a video conference and you find yourself looking at, what do I look like on camera, actually? Boy, oh boy, it's funny to see all this happening. Increased family time. We're at home now. Increased communication with our family, games, traditions. These are when I have a feeling a few traditions are going to be created for all of us out of a time like this. I also understand the other part where if we have grandmothers or mothers, or parents or dads in homes right now, in care facilities. It is a very difficult time. They need us the most right now, and sometimes we can't even be there for them right now. That weighs on us as people. I give you a lot of credit if you're going through that. I've shared a lot of, caring stories with you on the phone about that. My grandmother, your parents, hugging your grandkids right now. A lot of you told me, I just want to give them a hug.
Right.
That's what I want out of all this. Technology and interaction. Technology will help us lead us out of this. Pet adoptions, interesting. We have a great friend and client who actually works at Purina. I asked him how things are going. Going well. Going really well. Supply for or demand for pet food right now, all-time high. Why? Pet adoptions. Some of you gone out to humane societies and adopted pets. Some of you bought from breeders. And so when you're taking your daily walks, you're like, I never knew you had a dog before. When did you get that? Companionship to us, that tells us companionship is a very much needed thing in our lives.
Huge. Yeah, that's awesome. Thank you, Ken. A couple of things as well as we go through. I really noticed my wife and family becoming like a house general. All the stuff they do around the house on a constant daily basis it's tiring. It's a full-time job, especially when you're a teacher, you're an organizer, you're a planner, even without a lot of stuff happening post. So I want to, give my gratitude out, and Ken has mentioned it about his as well. Gratitude to our wives is really, really important right now. And in our scenario, and to those at home, and to those grandparents, and to those others who are helping to get through this and teaching in the COVID, it's really been pretty amazing as well. A couple of shout outs for myself is my mother's birthday was yesterday. So we had, of course, a call with her, a Zoom call, which was FaceTime last night for a couple of hours. And my daughters reached out and played some games with her. But it's a weird thing not to be able to do that. But it's a funny thing because on our we walk around the neighborhood last night. My daughter used to, when she was young, think that as she got older, but as grandma got younger, at some point they'd be the same age. It was really funny to go through, but those kind of concepts, and then she also thought that I was the oldest person in the world at that time because I was the tallest person she knew. So, yeah, Daddy's older than Grandma. Okay, we let that go for a little while, but it's just interesting stuff you have. What it's giving us is time to appreciate all these little stories. So gather what you can now because they become much, much more important even later.
Since you mentioned birthdays, I'd like to give a shout out. My dad's not a very technological person, so he's not watching right now. But I'm going to actually show him this one. Is that happy birthday, Dad? He's
awesome.
70 years old.
Sweet.
This year. I turned 40 this year. There's 30 years between us, so it's a big year for both of us.
It's
so
huge.
Happy birthday, Dad. Love you very much.
That's awesome. And happy birthday. We're going to sing for you now. I'm just kidding. We won't do that. But we'll spare you that piece. One thing I want to also discuss here as well is this perspective of staying at home order getting old. So I probably had 12 meetings in the last 2 days, which has been great. It's nice, but I do talk from like 7 a.m. until 5 or 6 p.m., which is pretty crazy, constantly. And bless Peter, because a lot of times he's listening to most of that as well, so he's phenomenal. I want to give my gratitude to him as well. But what's extremely important about this is I'm asking questions, and this is the cool thing. You guys are giving me this honest feedback, and sometimes you're hesitant at first, but I go, have you ever experienced anything like this? One of my clients said his grandmother told a story to him, or his mother, told a story to him that in the Great Depression, she had scarlet fever, and she was at 9 years old, taken from her home and placed in a facility 100 miles away or more, unable to talk with family for a month. The health department came in and quarantined her. So he said to me, the difference in this is we used to quarantine the sick, not the healthy. And you guys have all echoed that as well. Another of my clients said, have you ever experienced anything worse than this? One of them said Vietnam. One of them that said polio. I mean, there's a lot of responses in here. There's been flu epidemics and other things that have occurred, but when they weigh this out, the older my clients have, the more perspective they have. I'm finding the less concerned they are about money, the less they are concerned about this. They understand and they've seen this before. So just a very interesting piece that we have seen from some of the perspective. The phone calls we have with you are great. We won't share all your gory details or who they were with, but we get these all the time, and we thank you tremendously. You enrich our lives by sharing those stories, so thank you.
Yeah, a piece that we heard on this one is this getting old? Like as a question, right?
Yeah.
And some of you have shared with us that it's really good because before all this, there's been a massive divide between people.
Yeah.
Before this, if you called your family, hey, how you doing? Oh, I'm super busy. I'm running out the door. That's all changed. There's actually been like a world reset on all this. from a higher being potentially. It's a great way to just stop, reset. But now that the reset has been going on for a month and a half, some of us are like, okay, I'm good with the reset. You know, what's next, right?
Yeah.
What's next?
Yeah, I totally agree with that. That's a great one, Ken. That kind of leads right into our mindset. So you're going to notice sections we talk about in here, and really one is going to be housekeeping to start. Perspective is one piece, mindset's another. We're going to go through the market and some of the different pieces in planning. And then we're also going to have a closing. So we're going to try to give some structure to this because I think it might become a real consistent aspect for us. And a lot of you have had great feedback on the phone. It's amazing how many people I'm talking to say, yeah, I listen to your programs. And then you give us some great feedback. So a lot of this is a work in progress. So I'm not just going to make it about here's some stories all the time that are different. We're going to try to bring these in a real consistent, good format that are beneficial to you because we think it's a great opportunity to let you know, kind of peek inside what it is that we see and we do all the time and try to help you out. So with the mindset of behavior, what's really interesting is we were just listening to a couple calls this week with Dr. Elko and a few others and Don Connolly, but they believe that most people are overdeveloped survivors and underdeveloped achievers or thrivers. That's an important statement because if you look at the world is extremely pessimistic. So what we've done is we come up with another word. We talked about adaptability, right? We typically come up with a word and a theme. This week our theme is resiliency. In the past it's been adaptability, but in resiliency. What is resilient? Here's what's interesting. You know a resilient person when you see them because from crisis like this, it's actually good for them. You see them take energy from this to do incredible things. Resiliency is the ability to bounce back. So when you look at that, it's literally that's what it says in the dictionary. So as we look at resiliency, it becomes another important part of who you are and why you've been very successful in many cases, and you shared that with us. It's not necessarily that you're not going to hit crisis or avoid them. It's that you will hit them, but you're going to bounce back from them and behave right during them and do things that you learn from, more importantly. So that's really the key. We found resilient people have and how do you recognize a resilient person? Resilient people have the exact same emotions that you do. They just tend to pull the energy out of it and do something different. So they tend to go, yep, crisis is here. You see them spring into action. Where other people hit crisis, and most hit crisis, and they go, man, this stinks. And their verbs and their words become really tough. So one thing as well I want to say, we learned this recently from a couple of these experts. It said that the spoken word is 20 times more effective than your own words you say without speaking them out loud. That's important. So you have this constant script in your head, right? That's important. But when you speak words out loud, they become effective. They become, like I said, bulldozers or cranes to build things. So when you look at this, be very careful with the words you say, especially now that it's getting a little long in the tooth as far as this stay at home and you've now spent 24/7 with some of your people that you have for 5 and 6 weeks. Just start to work on some of that kindness. Work on that script in your head. And make sure when the words come out, if you say something stupid, apologize for it immediately. Don't let it go and let your pride get in the way. You have relationships for life here, and this is a chance to build them or destroy them. We want to help make sure you build them. So a couple things as well, and this is pretty cool. There's some biases in this as well. So we've talked about these before, but I want to actually give you, we talk about a lot of this as kind of the fundamentals, and there's about 10 or 15 or 20 biases that people have, and it's just human behavior. We've talked about this before, right? So the human behavior is very, very important. As humans, we all suffer from these. I want to make sure you know that, ourselves included, all right? The first one is a negativity bias. Generally, things are worse than they are. So whatever it is, we tend to project things that, this may be the case. We just have this picture that things are much, much worse than they actually are. So let me give you one sample. I went to Argentina in 2000, and it was right about the time, 2001 actually, with my family, 5 of us actually. It was wonderful, a wonderful experience. But the day before we left, there was pot banging and killing in Buenos Aires. It looked like the whole city was under siege by these protests and all. We hopped on an airplane despite that, and there was about 40% vacancies because people have heard about this and feared maybe 50%. So the good news is we kind of felt like first class in the normal economy seats. But as we got down there, I'm talking to these people in Spanish. I said, well, where's all the pot bang? Where's all the killing? He goes, oh, that was just over in that neighborhood yesterday. The city was great, peaceful, wonderful. You just stayed away from where they were protesting if they were that day. So people got this idea, though, from the media that a whole city of 26 million was under siege. So that's a huge negativity bias example I want to tell you about as well. One thing to do, how can we get away from that? combat it by stop watching the negative crud. The media has zero desire for you to be happy unless you're watching CBS Sunday Morning or some good news network. But the other one is, you can also, there's a program called Feedly, I think it's Feedly, Feedly, where you can actually program your own news content to come to you. Program it for positive. Program it for positive. It's a very important thing. Another one I want to add in here too is people, I'll jump in a bit on that as well. Another one is an availability bias. So availability bias is basically people overestimate something happening or the availability of it. If you'd say, oh, there's something's going to happen, there's going to be a ton of that available, and it's not. Or something's going to occur and more of it's going to happen than actually does. Because in our mind, we have this availability bias that also kind of distorts things as well. And then the third one is a confirmation bias. This one you got to be careful of. I don't care how crazy your idea is, we seek for something to make sure that seems right, to confirm what it is we're thinking. So that confirmation bias is, if you find any opinion that you want, you can hop on the internet and you can find somebody that will validate, confirm, and probably give you some, quote, scientific data as to why that's the case. What I would say is, if you're far one direction on an idea, don't simply go away from the other idea, because what happens is you strengthen your ability to think when you're looking at opposite sides going, I so believe this is the only way. Well, flip it and see, why does somebody else believe it's a different way? If you can ask that question, it's a huge part to kind of overcome the confirmation bias. So it's just giving you three. There's a bias when it comes to negativity bias. Watch out for it. Availability bias. We think there's something way worse is going to happen, or there's going to be more of it than we expect, or a confirmation bias as well. So at least with the behavioral finance, I wanted to give you three or so of these, and we'll bring little pieces like that to you in the program as well. But we got a very great idea now. It's called another way to focus is called What's Important Now.
Yeah, look for the WIN, W-I-N, What's Important Now. It's also a bias that we could have as well.
Yes.
Take a look at what's important now. I think a lot of us had a chance to do this in the world reset that we just talked about.
That's right.
What's important to all this? Family, traditions, being kind to people, being with people when we're with them now, enjoying the time that we're with them and not taking that for granted. That's a big one. I think that we've all figured out what's important now. Here's a good one. Accept what you cannot change and change what you cannot accept. Think about that for a little while. What can we change, or what can't we change? We can't change the stock market right now. We wish we could. We wish we could wave the wand and make it go back up, right? It will in time. Historically, it's done it. We can't change that it's raining out right now. It's the weather. We can't change it. Whether it's sunny, we wish it was a little warmer so we can get outside a little more, right? We can't change that. We can't change other people's actions, what they do to us or what they say to us. It goes back to that spoken word. Some people don't have a filter. We know who those people are in our life. We can't change that. But here's the things we can change. We can change our own actions. We can change the way that we treat people. In a world where you can be anything, be kind. We all work on that. Change your actions, change your thoughts, change that mental script that we talk about to the positive rather than, why is this happening to me? Oh, I can't believe this is happening. I can't believe that I have to stay at home. We can change that. Also, I learned this one too, as we're talking about the stay at home. A few of you have expressed your desires to retire in the next couple of years. And I asked you the question, well, how's that going for you right now? Because this is a little bit of a taste of retirement almost, right? And they're like, oh, I'm not ready.
That's kind of funny.
I'm not ready for this. It's a little
funny.
taste. So those people may work a few more years. Your environment, you can control what's in your environment. You can put positive things in your environment. You can bring in the negatives if you want. You can control all that. So keep in mind, what's important now.
Yeah, I love that. Thank you, Ken. That's great. It's a great piece as well. I think one thing I want to do now is just kind of go to the market and look at some of the pieces we have on market and planning. So for the market right now, I've said this before last program and others. Sometimes I think and sit, and sometimes I sit. So what's interesting about that is there's times where it's actually best just to sit and stay with the allocation that you have, sit with the plan that you have. And for most people, that's actually one of the best things you can do, but it's one of the hardest things you can do. I'll bring up a little story of a goalie here if I can remember it at the end. I don't want to do it now in case I run over, but I'll bring up a story of a goalie and what they do as well. But one thing we need to do is right now, this is the time we need to stay on track. We put plans together. Those plans are, in your case, fantastic plans, We just need to stick to them. What often happens is this is where people get the chance to veer off plan. So we want to stay on plan. Plans are set with these kind of corrections in mind. Don't forget that. Bull markets beget bear markets. Bear markets, after them, become bull markets again. That's what history's shown us. So it's a very interesting piece. It's kind of like spring is effervescent. It does come eventually. The one thing about the market and what we do in planning, there's an art and a science to it. Now, this is a very interesting piece. So I've had a client, last time, clients are listening to this, it's great. So when I'm talking to them, they bring this up or they'll send an email. And an observation from a client said this, well, you said in second quarter, the earnings could be horrible, because what will happen is if companies get an opportunity like this second quarter to throw all of their bad earnings in a quarter, they're going to do it. It's going to look horrible for data. GDP will come down significantly, maybe 7 or 8%, who knows, right? So all these statistics compared to the Great Depression, that stuff will all be compared. But here's the case. The market hates what it doesn't know, right? Who doesn't know this? We're talking about it. Everybody's talking about it. So people say, with all this bad news coming, then the market's going to probably have a second bottom. Unless you study history. I'm going to make this statement. With all this bad news, is the market going to hit a much lower low? The answer is, who the heck knows? The answer is not necessarily. Historically, the market looks out 6 to 12 months in hope and optimism. Because remember, that cycle turns from fear to optimism and hope. And many people will be left behind when that happens. So if you're making decisions on what's about to happen, logical decisions, you got to be careful and make sure you're studying the history. We give you the advice on the bigger picture long term. Don't look for what's about to happen to be what the market's going to do. The market says fear happens just like this, boom. Optimism and hope occur despite the data coming in to show that some of that fear was real. The market hates things it doesn't expect. So that's an extremely important part. So when you look out to 6 to 12 months, and why is the market going up now? Those are the questions I'm getting. When the data is going to be so bad, Chris, you said there's going to be bad. I did. But what I didn't say is when the data is bad, the market's going to really stink. It may, but history says in most cases it won't. It'll move up during that time. So anyway.
Yeah, look at Chris makes a great point. 1917, 1918, the Spanish flu. The worst of the data came out in 1918. What was the market doing in 1918? Going up. 1987, same situation. 2001 and 2, same situation. 2008, 2009. The data came out, was terrible, yet the market started to rebound.
Correct. So there's a couple things I said. First point is it's art and a checklist. So there's an art to this. People ask, when is the bottom of a... Nobody knows when the bottom of a bull market is, or the bottom of a bear market, I should say. People do know when a bull market ends, because there's a 20% drop and people can see it, and it typically happens fairly quickly, right? But there's no bottom of the bear market bell that's rung. Warren Buffett has said, I don't know when I've never, ever known when a bear market has ended, ever. But I do know when prices look good. As a matter of fact, Ben Graham said this, the drop is not the problem, it's the solution. Ponder that for a while. I happen to agree with him as well. So it's really interesting to see that. Even experts don't recognize that.
Yeah, if it's the solution. So what are we doing right now? We have, over the next week, 12 meetings lined up with our portfolio managers to talk to them, talk to their team, because here's what we want to know, and here's what they're telling us. The tide is out. Which seashells do we want? Which ones do we want? Which ones look great? This is the bargain hunting season for them right now. You're seeing a few changes we're making in your portfolio, more to that active type of management right now in a category. Why we can pick up a few extra points there by finding those seashells right now that we want in our collection, if you will. We read hundreds of charts from JP Morgan, from all different sources that we read, and we try to discern what's important to you. But we're going through that data time and time again.
Yeah, that's an important piece to know. So just to give you a snippet, a lot of people, what are you guys doing to the time? We want to give you a snippet. We're not going to do it every week, but we've got 12 meetings, for instance, in that case, as Ken has said, tons of charts. We're looking at and discerning, does this one make sense to show anybody? Well, some of you said from the last program, the chart that really struck them most is the one that showed during the bull run, people have been net selling trillions of dollars of stocks, doing exactly opposite what you should. So it's an interesting piece how some of those charts actually connect to you. So we get that sometimes those are great when they're just confirmation of what we do. Another one is we've been internally reviewing all your plans and actions. So this is important. Having a team like we do, which is really, really important, having all of us available, has allowed us to go over all of your plans, your investments, really look at what you have on a pretty consistent basis here. And everybody's gone over probably once or twice, maybe 3 or 4 times during this correction, more than even normal. Why? Because we want to see if there's any opportunities. And if there have been opportunities, we have then reached out when those make sense. In most cases, the plans, the scenarios are set well, that our timing of our normal rebalances, our timing of the change of our mid-cap value category have all, maybe are going to fall in just a normal rebalance time frame, but for a few aggressive people, very few aggressive people, we've done a rebalance a little bit early. To many of you, we've said your allocation is right on, we need to continue with where we are. So again, a lot of that's occurred, and you've seen some of that from us, but when we're making our phone calls, it doesn't mean we need to jump and do something now. We've looked at that. If there's something we need to do, we've looked at that piece as well. This is an interesting piece. There's probably been 5 great buying opportunities in your life. You know when the most important buying opportunity for you is, if you can buy? It's now. Because you can't do anything from the past except learn. So when you look at this, 5 buying opportunities in your life, have you recognized any of them? Probably not until they were over. Because that's what happens. People right now are delaying buying. And they're saying, why? Well, because I'm going to wait till, it looks better. It's just really super hard to do. Super hard to do. So as it comes into it, Ken's got a couple of things here when it comes to planning, and then we'll wrap up. We're probably going to be 5 or 6 minutes over, but there's some good stuff here.
Yeah, so I'll go through the planning, fairly quickly.
Sure.
We've actually talked a few times about these now, so this is probably a good review right now. But when we look at the CARE Act, we looked at the Secure Act that passed in December of the 11th hour last year. We had to adapt very quickly to that as well. But again, on a case-by-case basis, when there's obvious actionable items, we've reached out to you. We've talked about the conversion planning with you. If it's critical at that point in time, we've done that. We'll continue to do that as well. Some things that have changed out of the Secure Act and the CARES Act, it really comes down to required minimum distributions for a lot of you. There are provisions on 401ks. If you've been affected by the coronavirus, there are provisions for that. We can help you through that. Right. I don't know how many of our clients that affects, so I don't want to go too deep in that if it's not pertaining to us right now. We know the information. We know it very well. So if you've been affected by this from a health standpoint, from a financial standpoint, reach out to us. We will be able to guide you and give you the advice that you need when it comes to taking out the money, spreading the tax over 3 years. That's an option as well. Again, we'll go through all the advice that you need. But required minimum distributions, those who need to take it, they're waived this year. A lot of you know that. If you don't know that, that's what's happening this year. They've been waived. You don't have to make them up next year in 2021. It's a reset of the calculation, and we'll go through that and we'll tell you what that number looks like. Qualified charitable distributions, a lot of you do those. That's giving money from your IRA to a church is a great example of that. That's a very common practice that we see a lot of you do. Those are still in play. You don't have to, you don't have to wait on those, or you don't have to wait for something to happen. You can still do those. It's still a great planning idea as well.
But as Ken is saying that, a lot of the people who are over 70 and a half of our client group. So there's a good portion who are under, but of those over, that's a phenomenal point. So don't look at that and go, I'm 42 years old, what is this QCD? That's not pertinent to you until 70 and a half.
If you're under 70 and a half, Chris brings up a great point. I've talked about this before, and I just helped a client do one of these. They're called donor advised funds. You control the donation, you get the tax deduction because of that, right? It's one of those things you can control. And there's rules behind all that. Again, we'll talk about this with you. You can talk about this with us as well if you feel like that's a good place for your charitable giving.
Awesome.
Budgeting needs and wants. This is a good one. I've talked to a few of you about this. Pre-retirement. If you're thinking about retiring in the next 2 or 3 years, this is a great stress test of your portfolio right now. If we can make it work now, we can surely make it work when historically the markets have rebounded, right? This is a great pressure test. This is a great stress test of the income that we could expect out of our portfolio. Yeah. Practice retirement. Practice it. Yep. Get used to it. Don't fool yourself. One of the things I've seen a couple of people do is fool themselves and, hey, you know what, I'm spending this now, but in retirement I think it's going to change dramatically. Well, know yourself. Know your tendencies. Know what to expect out of yourself when it comes to that. Yeah,
good. Thank you, Ken. So as we kind of start to the wrap up here of the closing, again, there's like 6 hours worth of stuff we could talk about, but it's awesome. We're just trying to concatenate them so you can get them in a brief format here, and we can talk more later. But what may happen? One of my clients is a big real estate person. I asked him questions about this. He's been teaching real estate at Marquette University for many years, so thank you very much for some of the insight. But right now, shopping centers. What is going to happen to shopping centers? What's going to happen to commercial real estate? What's going to happen with remote meetings? Airlines, small colleges, folding. Here's a statement I make. I'll be the first person back to Marcus Theaters, but I won't be the second. Think about that. So how is that going to play out for most people right now? Here's what typically happens. Right now, the people who aren't investing are concerned about Corona. We'll see what happens with Corona. And then that'll lead right into the election. And then that will lead right into the new year. So you're going to find people for a full year completely paralyzed by some new pandemic or new panic or new fear. So what's really interesting is to watch that. Watch others and watch that for yourself. I want to give that out to you because once I tell you, there becomes a recency bias. I'll say, so as a sample, I'll give you some of this as well. I may save the penalty kick to another time, but I'll see that in just a moment. This is a very interesting statement by Harry Truman. I am a huge history reader. I love it. I love reading economic history. People say you're crazy, but it's a very good point. There's nothing new in the world, only the history you don't know. Go back long enough and you're probably going to find something like what's happened today in whatever new pandemic occurs as well. So careful of that process I mentioned. Another thing, too, is about generations. Generations is 22 to 30 years apart. So what's really interesting is there's a lot of stuff that you give time people to forget. Financial history is the most forgot item you'll find in the quickest format. Wall Street has the shortest memory of any history out there. What, that happened last year? They don't even remember it. I'm just, that's being a bit facetious, but
yeah,
that's a really good part.
Just real quick on that, easily forgotten, but easily remembered as well. Think about when a lot of you started investing money in the markets, the 80s and 90s. You put $1 in, it becomes $2. Great experience with investing.
Right.
Think about if you started investing money in the 2000s. $1 became 50 cents. Not so great. That can stick with us so easily. I saw a funny billboard. We talk about millennials all the time. I have to bring this up. We have one on our team. He's phenomenal. You know who you are. But he's the oldest millennial. But we keep saying he's the oldest millennial I've ever met. They say millennials are lazy. Prove them wrong and retire early.
I like that. I like that. But not from our firm. Just from for people outside of our firm. I'm just kidding. That's awesome. That's super cool. So let me share you very quick the penalty kick, and I got a closing here. But the penalty kick example. So they've talked to goalies. You know goalies, and they do that penalty kick at the end of the game when it's all tied up. So if you look at the size of the goal and you do all the statistics, if you looked at the coverage of a goalie, you'd say, well, they always jump right or left, they do this or that, but you know they would be just as good if they stood in one spot, and it's statistically proven. If they stood in the middle and just stood there, they'd actually cover just as much as if they dove either way. So since that's as effective, and then goalies know this, they ask them, well then, why don't you do that? Why don't you just stand middle? He goes, because it doesn't look like we're doing anything. See what's interesting there? It's more effective probably just to stand in the middle and reach a little bit either direction than it is to go fully in any single direction. But the perception is that they're doing something, even if it may not be effective. So it's interesting to see that. We wanted to bring that idea up as well. One thing I wanted to tell you is that we are absolutely serious about our guidance to you, and we're committed to you and what we do, especially when it helps your outcome. While wealth management is what we do, guiding people through adversity is who we are. So I want to thank you on behalf of all of our Gentian team here. Our team has been phenomenal, hopefully, through this. You've been phenomenal through this as well. And what I want to do in this is, until next week, I want you to stay safe, stay positive, and be grateful. Thank you.